Hello and welcome to another planning appeal case study video. I'm John Peters, and in this video I'm going to explain how we overcame a recent refusal by Solihull Council for one of our clients. This planning appeal was to overcome the refusal for a retrospective rear extension that was refused by the local authority Solihull Planning Department. So our client was initially booked in for a free no obligation consultation to run through the refusal reasons that had been issued by Solihull Council and to evaluate if an appeal was viable or if an alternative option would be best suited for them. The free no obligation consultation, which took around about 20 minutes, found that this case was viable for appeal to the Planning Inspectorate, taking the decision process away from Solihull Council Planning Department. This case was refused by Solihull Council for the following reasons. The proposed single-storey rear extension, by reason of its size, citing relationship with the neighbouring property, would have an unneighbourly bearing and overbearing and dominant impact that would be unduly harmful to the amenities currently enjoyed by the occupiers of the property. For these reasons, the proposal is contrary to local policies and the National Planning Policy Framework. The Planning Inspector in this case identified the main reasons for this case were the effect of the proposed development on the living conditions of the occupiers of the neighbouring property. The Planning Inspector started by clarifying some local policies, one being the House Extension Guidelines Supplementary Planning Document 2010, the SPD. It highlights that the Council will apply the 45-degree guide to ascertain what is likely to be acceptable. The development encroaches on the 45-degree sightline. Nevertheless, the SPD recognises that there will be greater flexibility to extend at single storey to the rear of the property, and that the 45-degree guide would not always be appropriate depending on site-specific factors including orientation. The inspector then clarified and explained that the development extends 6.1 metres from the rear of the appeal property along the shared boundary with the neighbouring property. The height of the development would be 3.1 metres to the eaves and 3.6 to the top of the lantern roof. Whilst a high boundary fence exists between the properties, the extension is significantly higher. The extension extends along the shared boundary, which is set at an obtuse angle to the rear of the neighbouring property. The extension infills the area in between the fence and the previously approved rear extension, and that a smaller conservatory was approved in this location. However, the appeal development exceeds this by approximately 2 metres in length. The inspector noted that there is an increase in the scale of the development compared to the approved conservatory. However, due to the angle build form of the extension, combined with the space between the extension next door and the development, the inspector found that appeal development is not visually overbearing and would not create a sense of enclosure to the occupiers of the neighbouring property. The inspector concluded that the proposed development would not be harmful to the living conditions of the occupiers of the neighbouring property, and there is no conflict with local policy and local plan, which amongst other things seeks to ensure developments respect the amenity of existing proposed occupiers and would be a good neighbour. Confirming also that no conflict with the framework, which seeks to ensure developments have a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. I need to point out that in relation to this case that there was a recent change in the legislation recently that was introduced with the Levelling Up Act. This means that should the applicant fail to appeal a householder retrospective refusal within the statutory appeal timescale, which is 12 weeks from the decision date on the refusal, and an enforcement notice is subsequently served by the local authority, the applicant would not have the ability to appeal under the enforcement notice under grounds A, and that is to request the permission be granted by the planning inspector to keep the development. This would leave the applicant with no redress, and say that enforcement notice was to say remove the development, then if the applicant failed to remove the development, the case would become a criminal case with no way for the applicant to appeal. It's vitally important that if you have had a retrospective application refused and you wish to keep the development or use, that you appeal within that statutory time frame. Many of you who have similar refusals are repeatedly stating that you had little or no correspondence throughout the application process, and the first thing you knew was receiving the refusal notice from the council, in some cases when you received a letter from ourselves. We completely understand that the planning process can be very frustrating, the costs involved, the time it takes and so on, but do remember, we deal with this on a daily basis for others just like yourself. With Planning Appeals Experience Matters, our specialist appeal team who handle over 2.5% of all planning appeals in England and Wales that are currently produced are submitted, start by producing a comprehensive and robust appeal statement. That, in this specific case, covered 19 pages and just over 3,500 words. It's important to detail in the appeal statement where the local authority failed in their assessment of the case, and how, where possible, both local and national policies apply in favour of the appeal. Additionally, if possible, bring in similar cases that the Planning Inspectorate found in favour of at appeal. Obviously, with the back catalogue we have of wins, we're able to use these cases and what the inspector said in them as additional argument to support the case we are working on. Once an appeal statement is completed, we send the document to our client asking them to check that they are happy for us to submit the case. If we need to add any additional information that the client may have forgotten previously to supply, it's done at this point and the case is then submitted. It's vitally important that all documents and responses are submitted on time throughout the process, as failure to do so will result in the appeal not being successful, something we do hear about often when people attempt an appeal for the first time. Always ensure you use a professional who has considerable experience of appeals. It's worth asking them for some recent successful planning appeal case studies, like you'll find on our website. Due to the large number of cases we represent, we have a dedicated team that liaises with the Planning Inspectorate on a daily basis. For this appeal, an independent planning inspector from the Planning Inspectorate visited the site on the 2nd of September, and we're pleased to confirm that the appeal was upheld and permission granted on the 10th of October in a 2-page appeal decision notice. If you'd like to find out if we can help you with your planning appeal, complete our online form on our website www.planningappealsuk.com, and our new case support team will arrange for a free, no obligation consultation with one of our planning appeal assessment professionals. Thank you for taking the time to watch this planning appeal case study video, and I look forward to producing another one very shortly. Thanks a lot. Bye.